2. Chris, begin your cut here because there will be a pause. What is up, everyone? Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast with my co-host, Evan Damrell. Today's show is all about Collin Sexton because we're kicking off Collin Sexton week here on the pod as we continue our detailed player review series. Segment 1, we're going to dive into the chances he resigns before he even hits restricted free agency. Segment 2, looking at perhaps a sign and trade market. And segment 3, looking at what other teams perhaps could be interested in Sexton if they decide to pursue him in free agency. That's all coming up today on Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. All right, today's episode, by the way, is brought to you by Sakara. Sakara Nutrition is a wellness company anchored in that thinks food is medicine on a mission to nourish. Go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code lockedon20 for 20% off at checkout. The music you heard on the way in case you're listening in audio form, is from our friends at Astro Radio. Check them out on Spotify or Apple Music. I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA at large for places like Fear the Sword and Dime on Uproxx. Evan, my co-pilot, is covering the Cleveland sports scene at large with, I guess, a most focus on the Cleveland Cavaliers, I would say.
It's my wheelhouse. I talk about them. We talk about them 5 days a week.
That's like your jam. That's like your comfort zone.
That was my come up.
Yeah. Now you're flexing everywhere. You can check them out at Facebook's Right Down Euclid. Evan, before we get into the Collin Sexton of it all, we do have to note that Anderson Varejao is going to be representing the Cleveland Cavaliers at the draft lottery on Tuesday.
Evan Damrell will be representing Locked On Cavs at the draft lottery on Tuesday.
That's right. So he'll be recording from a hotel room in undisclosed part of the Windy City. But the last time we saw Anderson Varejao was when he did that weird cameo at the end of the season, like 2 years ago now, and that feels like about 9 years ago now because of how things have gone. But Anderson Varejao, we'll see if he brings the Cavs luck. I think this ultimately, like, it doesn't matter, but like a more fun choice than like Kobe Altman or like a Gilbert member of the Gilbert family or like a player. Like, I kind of think this one's more fun unless you're gonna send like
Collin Sexton or somebody.
You need to pick like the player who would have like fun with it, and like Darius might. But
I think Collin Sexton would have fun with it.
Jared Allen might. Jared could have like his own like version of fun with it, but like can you imagine like Evan Mobley just like sitting there on the dais, just like.
No, Evan Mobley's too busy shooting threes with Scotty Barnes in an open gym right now to really be bothered. So
just putting on.
I think Anderson Varejao is a good, interesting pick. I think it's fun that he and the organization are on good terms. I know things were a little weird for a bit, but I think the contract situation definitely helped. And I think it's interesting because, like I said, arguably his best season as an NBA player, he averaged 14 and 14 for the Cavs before he ruptured an Achilles. And coincidentally enough, the Cavs have the best odds of picking 14th overall. So thankfully, folks, if you're watching the draft lottery from home or if you're me watching it in person tomorrow, you'll know pretty quickly where the Cavs are picking, because if they aren't picking 14, they are up in the top 4. And shit will hit the fan on this show because I will be insufferable if the Cavs get a top 3 pick, because I'm going to taunt the hell out of Locked On Rockets, Locked On Thunder, and also Tony East from Locked On Pacers, because just what could have been for him.
Yeah. I'm setting the over/under and how many times you mentioned you're going to be in Chicago at like 2.5, and you're almost there. So BetOnline, let me throw some scratch down on that. But Evan, let's talk about.
I'm done. Okay. Where am I going?
The Windy City.
What's that?
Okay. Evan, let's talk about Collin Sexton and the chances he resigns first, because I think the more that this has progressed, I think this is the likeliest scenario. I can't tell you like 100% like why I feel that way. I don't have, if I had like information that would lead me to say this is like 100% where this is headed, blah, blah, blah. I think you would just like, you or I would just like write it or say it or whatever. But you think about how the situation has developed. You think about what he said. You think about what the team said. You think about the fact that he was like kind of visible in different ways with the team at the end of the year, which kind of felt not insignificant to me. We've said this a lot. I think the agency change probably increases the odds he's back to some degree, because now he's a clutch client and not a CAA client. That's a little speculative. That's just what my gut tells me. I think it's more likely he's back, and I think it makes sense for him and the team if they can figure out what the number is. If they can figure out what the structure of the deal is. All of these things that are not necessarily the easiest thing to do, But I think if they can reasonably come to something that makes everyone a little bit happy here, I think it makes sense for everyone just to get this done before you even let this hit the market. Because we'll get into why, but there's like a chance that like even if there aren't a ton of teams, you would think the market could be interesting for if the Cavs want to kind of control Sexton's next 4 years, not only to like get him for him to get paid, but also for them to kind of manage their cap sheet in a reasonable way.
Yeah, we talked about before we started recording some of the teams that have a lot of cap space to pay Collin Sexton, maybe what he wants, like in the upper neighborhoods of what he wants. But I think you hit the head on the nail for sure when you said that there seems to be like a mutual wanting on both sides. And I think maybe Clutch being the bridge between both parties involved is definitely beneficial. I think it's pretty clear that like Sexton wants to be here. Kobe Altman made it. If he used a ton of praise on Collin Sexton all throughout his exit interview, I had to think of the term there. And I think you just wouldn't do that if you weren't looking to bring a guy back. So it's just going to make things look uncomfy, and it's also going to kind of make you look shitty and two-faced in the public eye. And I know the court of public opinion doesn't necessarily weigh on the transactional duties of organizations, and it's a business at the end of the day. But I think if the Cavs want a positive PR stunt, this is a pretty easy one. And I think, in all honesty, I think there's a better chance Collin Sexton's a Cavalier next season. And I don't know how I want to say long-term is long-term, because it could be a Terry Rozier extension. It could be a 5-year extension, which I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think they had a better chance of Collin Sexton being a Cavalier than the Cavs picking 14th.
Yeah.
Like the Cavs have a 97.6% chance of picking 14th. I feel that comfortable in saying it's like 98 to 99% sure that Collin will be back with the Cavs next year.
What I think will be interesting is that like I will wonder if there is like a middle ground in terms of like both sides making this work, or who is perceived to give up if this were to happen.
It's tricky because if he wasn't coming off an injury, I think this would be so much easier. Obviously,
he'd have more leverage, but it's also like if you're the Cavs, we've talked about a lot. Like they are managing, like building on their future cap in a lot of ways, just with what the money they spend this summer. Whether that's like Karis LeVert's looking for an extension, Darius Garland's extension, all that stuff. You're sort of trying to build in kind of flexibility into your future cap. You want to I can understand if like I was reading the Cleveland sports legendary Pluto's like about like the Cavs offseason on Sunday, and he was like they should offer like 2 years, $18 million at most for Collin. And like Clutch isn't signing that. And like you could say like you're gonna let him walk at that point, but like I also think he's better than that. I think he's
also no disrespect to Terry Pluto, but I don't think he understands how NBA contracts work.
I mean, I don't know that, so I don't want to say, but like I look at
I do. Okay. I'll say it.
You have fun with that, but I look at what you would need to do. It's like you need to there's going to be some kind of like longer term commitment with this. If it's going to get done before the thing, it's going to be something that hits a certain level of money and it's a certain number of years. There's no reason for Collin Sexton to sign something that doesn't give him and his family and everything like multi-year security. That I think is the baseline. The money part is almost harder to figure out in the structure because again, if I'm the Cavs, I want to front load it, and you probably want to say I want this to be a little bit less because you're coming off this injury. If you're his camp, you want to drive a bargain, and if you can use someone as leverage, and this is where going back to all the leaks with him last year with the Knicks and everything. It's like I think that was clearly trying to get ahead of the game and saying, hey, like teams are going to give us money. You should get ahead of this now and give it to us now. That was what that was to me. I wonder how this plays out and if it's quieter and what it is and what the timeline kind of looks like, because we're May 16th right now as we're recording this. You would think that this free agency opens sometime in July. Late June, early July, right when free agency opens, is kind of the window here. Like there's time, but there's not like unlimited time. But I agree with you. I think it's highly more likely than not that he's back. I wouldn't say I feel that strongly about it getting done right when free agency opens, because it's
not right when free agency opens, but I don't think, because we'll talk about this in one of the upcoming segments, just the overall market. And I think one Jalen Brunson kind of setting the tone and being like the top prize in terms of just like maybe free agent guards in general. He'll probably set the market maybe a little bit for Sexton, possibly. And also just because Brunson's way more of a playmaker and a better defender than Sexton is.
He's unrestricted, which
simplifies it. But if you're calling Sexton and say, hey, Jalen Brunson got paid this much, I want to be paid something comparable because this is the guard setting the tone for the market. But at the same time, it is also a little tricky to kind of figure out financially how it works. But I think we'll talk about the teams in a bit. I just don't think a lot of teams are going to be shelling out the cash Sexton's maybe looking for. Plus, it's the fact that the Cavs can offer a little bit more financial security. If it is somehow a 5-year deal, Cleveland has that luxury in their back pocket to say, like, hey, Collin, we can offer you an additional 5th year on a contract as well. So if, like, knock on wood, he doesn't have a season-ending injury like this again, but we need to see what he looks like physically as well, just to make sure he's fully through the woods and that his recovery was 100% on point. And ultimately, I think he made the right call having surgery and electing just to shut down for the year to fully recover. But you need to get a full scope of who he is too. So the Cavs are taking a little bit of a gamble. And like you said, it's just to find that sweet spot where both sides are happy to say, like, okay, this is a deal with the Cavs. Probably won't get fucked financially if like Collin Sexton's knee injury is just going to become a regular thing as a player who has a bit of an Iron Man history, but maybe his body starts breaking down. If you're Sexton, it guarantees you the most money as possible, especially because you didn't agree to terms last offseason. So now you're kind of staring down the barrel of what maybe holds next for you too.
Yeah. All right. After the break, we'll get into some of those markets and specifically talk about it through a sign and trade lens. But first, going to tell everyone about Sakara. Sakara, again, is helping people eat better. And look, feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you live a healthy, balanced lifestyle and truly enjoy it with delicious, plant-rich, transformative nutrition that builds a foundation for living in your best body. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with the organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfasts, lunches, and dinners are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients helping boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, and get your skin glowing. Plus, it's delivered to your door, ready to eat. Their products are designed to support your wellness goals anytime, anywhere. From their best-selling metabolism super powder to the foundation, their daily supplement packs, they're all fantastic. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockdown20 or enter code lockdown20 at checkout. Again, that's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockdown20 to get 20% off your first order. That's sakara.com/lockdown20. All right, back here on Locked On Cavs, I'm Chris. That's Evan. If you want a great second listen today, go check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stayman, Sam Ferris, and Lee Flulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA Draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Evan, tell me if you believe what I'm about to say is true or false. I think the Cavs, just by process of doing their job, will do their cursory analogy. It may not leak out. It may not, be a thing that it's like a Cleveland.com headline or whatever, or an ESPN headline or whatever. What I think they will do, just because this is how the business works, they will explore what the market is for teams that are interested in Sexton. They will call and say, hey, do you have interest in this guy? What is your value? And they will gauge the value. That will help them establish, I think, their contract parameters and what they're comfortable with based on what they, Collin and his camp can go out and negotiate. And also, look, if there are teams that come calling and you want to kind of figure out what it works, I think Sexton is not 100% in the level of locked into that core. I think he's
absolutely
maybe the fourth, fifth guy. But I think he's a tier below the Mobley, Allen, Garland core, in part because of his injury. And I think there will be a sign and trade is tricky for a lot of reasons, for cap purposes, really. But it's something I think that they will at least kick around and scope the market out a little bit.
I think you're right on that. I think you have to see if teams are obviously interested. You do wonder maybe if a team like Detroit, who has the cap space to maybe sign Sexton and also maybe take the risk of letting him recover further and not rushing him back. But also, if you're the Cavs, it'd be remiss of them as an organization not to explore this market a little bit too, because like you said, he's not untouchable. He's not Darius Garland, who will likely get signed to a max or pretty freaking close to it as soon as free agency opens up, even though the extension won't kick in until next year. He's not Evan Mobley, who's your crown jewel and arguably going to be your best player overall long term. Or he's not Jared Allen, who's your defensive anchor. He's kind of in that tier of Lauri Markkanen and Isaac Okoro and players in that just mesh and echelon there. Maybe the rookie as well that they draft this year, if they find an offer they can't refuse and it really makes them a tangible upgrade too, like kind of in that grouping where they'd like to keep this player, but if an offer comes along that makes them better as a team immediately and maybe secures backup point depth or gives them a proper wing to add on the perimeter or XYZ, you name it. We've listed their needs quite a bit. We've talked about it a lot as well. Yeah, it's remiss of the Cavs not to explore that option. But like you said, sign and trades are tricky. They're never always clean just because it's posturing between organizations at that point because you have to find a team who doesn't overvalue their assets. And maybe the Cavs are a team that overvalues their players and what they have. But it's credit where credit's due. They got a first-round pick for Larry Nance Jr., and they were able to flip that into Larry Marketing. So it's interesting to see what the process will be like in terms of asset acquisition this offseason. But on the same spectrum, do teams value Sexton as a first-round pick? Do they value him as a young player plus salary to match? Do they value him as seconds and salary to match? How do they view him? And that's just kind of tough to gauge because, again, no one's seen him play since November of last year, and he has had a full knee, like a reconstructive knee procedure. Yes, he's on track to being healthy and better, and I'm trying to figure out like where exactly he's at in his recovery, but he'll hopefully be back by training camp. But again, there's still uncertainty and maybe hesitation on teams' parts to like really commit serious money to him because you don't know what you're going to get either.
Yeah, there have been there have been more sign and trades in recent years. I mean, like you had the Christian Wood goes to the Rockets deal. In that deal, sends Isaiah Stewart, the 16th pick in that draft, who ends up getting a pick in that draft that becomes Isaiah Stewart. You had the D'Angelo Russell one not that long ago. You had the Malcolm Brogdon one, which ended up being a first rounder as well. There's not really a reason for the Cavs, I think, to really explore this. Like if there's not money or like a pick like that to kind of entice them, I don't even know if 100% that is worth it. You would have to see what that pick is and kind of feel comfortable with that. I would wonder what they would approach that with and what that would say about, LeVert's future and things that might inform as well as how they want to build out the roster going forward if that's the avenue they explored. The other thing is like you have to find teams that want that player, maybe want to build the next year or something like that, but also like they'd be willing to hard cap themselves, right? Like there's some of these teams that, if the salary cap, it's $30 million or so above the salary cap, the cap. So like that is like what you need to explore, I think, is you need to look at this and say, okay, like, can we get that kind of value? Can we get that kind of value back? And even then, I'm not sure if it's 100% worth it if you really like the player. And look, if maybe Sexton's camp says like we want to go somewhere else, like there could be some of that too. We don't really know. I mean, the expectation from what Sexton says, I think he wants to be back, but it's also like let's see how this process plays out before anything is like I think declared 100%.
No, I absolutely agree. I think it's going to be an interesting few. Like you said, he's not going to be probably signed immediately by Cleveland. I know there's some like shaky reporting out there that says so, but I doubt that just given how things go and how this organization kind of operates.
I kind of think if I'm the Cavs, I'd want to get it done. I think early. We'll explain.
Yeah. We'll explain it the next time.
If you want to do it, I think you just do it. I don't think you wait and like potentially like. I think if you truly believe in a guy and you say, okay, this is a guy we want to build with. This is a guy that at least we want to have on our roster for the next year and like figure out what to do with going forward. If that's like your baseline view and you think the money is reasonable for the contract you could do, I think especially even if there's not a ton of teams out there in the market, I think there's just a point where it's like I would rather just sign the guy than worry about like trying to play the maximum money game. And I say as this is a guy who's talked a lot about how like this is an important summer for the Cavs from a cap purpose. In a lot of ways, but like you'd have to. I think
that's what gives me pause. Is I'm in that camp where I'm like, how much money are you willing to attach to Collin Sexton?
Yeah, but if it's like
that's your long term financials too.
If you're trying to save like $2 million or $3 million or something like that in the market, I don't know if I'm worried that much about it. And as the cap's going to rise, and as one would assume. So that's where I'm at. Evan, after the break though, let's talk about what teams could be interested in him, and also the impact that Jalen Brunson's market could have on him. In the guard market out there. But Evan, tell everyone first about our friends at Built
Bar. Sure thing, Buckaroo. This is the time of year that I'm actually back in the gym right now, and I'm back at it really because of today's sponsor, Built Bar. It feels like it's almost not really a resolution because I enjoy eating them because they're just a delicious sweet treat that I love so much. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, puffs included, 100% real chocolate. Go to BuiltBar.com and scroll right down to their macros charts. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calories, high fiber, low carbs. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 14 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. They have flavors like mint brownie, coconut, coconut almond, and new this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. I adored it. It's so good. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. And if you think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. And it's delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how they pull it off every time, but they do it. So if you're interested, go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com.
All right, we're back here on Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris. That is Evan. So, Evan, here are the teams that have, according to Spot Track, expected cap space this upcoming summer. This is going to go from the most cap space to the least amount of cap space. And there's only 5 teams. Orlando at 28.6, Detroit at 25.7, Indiana at 25, the Spurs at 22, and Portland at 21. Portland doesn't strike me as a Sexton team. They have, I think, an aim a little.
They could be if they just want to rinse and repeat what they just traded.
Sure, like if you want to run that route, San Antonio doesn't strike me as that kind of market either. In theory,
absolutely not. They have so many guards on their roster.
Yeah, and they've drafted a lot of guards like that. Seems tricky. So then we get to Orlando, who doesn't totally seem like one. Detroit and Indiana would seem to be the two most likely ones. I think there's been more connection to Detroit than there has been Indiana to point. And I think the Knicks is a team that'll maybe make a trade call or something or kind of loom out there as well. And this is where it gets to Jalen Brunson. If Jalen Brunson doesn't go to the Knicks or doesn't go to the Pistons, this is where I think like Sexton's market could come from. It's like if Brunson goes back to Dallas or goes to one of these other teams, this other team will have to come up with plan B, and Sexton like reasonably could be their plan B.
Yeah, like I said at the top, Jalen Brunson could kind of set the market for Collin just in terms of what he wants to get paid because he is arguably the second best guard available in free agency heading into this year, just depending on how you feel about certain guards and just who's maybe more available in that price range as well. But Brunson is a better playmaker, obviously a better defender. He is on a Western Conference finalist team, so that's just a little bit of the difference here in the vid. But like you said, Sexton could have some intrigue for those teams. I think in theory, if you're the Knicks, you like that fit a little bit. If you believe in RJ Barrett's playmaking chops, if you maybe shake things up, I doubt they're going to get rid of Tibbs, but if maybe they do get rid of Thibodeau because they're impatient or just an unstable organization because, the Knicks.
They might have done it by now. They might have done it by now.
They might have done it by now, but you never know. It's the Knicks. But the Pistons make sense too, just because if you pair Sexton next to Cade, you add a little bit of that scoring threat dimension. I think it's just a punch for the Cavs, or not the Cavs, the Pistons offensively. But if you're Cleveland, do you want to deal with an in-division opponent that you possibly risk facing a guy 4 times a year that could maybe be the difference maker in a game because they struggled with the Pistons last year? Indiana makes some sense as well. I think you could throw Oklahoma City in for consideration too, just as a team who maybe wants to consolidate some of their assets and maybe go after a young name to put next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who in theory makes sense to next to Sexton because he's a bigger guard who can provide playmaking and defense next to Sexton, who doesn't provide that, but provides a scoring punch at 3 different levels. There's teams out there that make sense, but of those teams you mentioned, I think Detroit makes the most, and then Indiana, and then, like you said, Portland, San Antonio really trickle off after that, and the Knicks as well do make some sense, but I think the Knicks might try to go bigger name hunting, and like Brunson will be their primary target.
Yeah, it's just you get past where I think Sexton also falls in this, and how this could shape his market. To me, is interesting because I think once you get past him, and once you get past, Levine is going to be UFA as well, and we'll see what happens there. But
he's going to be a king, baby.
Probably going to go back to the Bulls for lots of money. You look at guys like
a joke, everyone.
Okay, but you look at like after you get past Brunson, who's kind of like the lead guy in the market. John Wall maybe declines his player option and like does something there, or maybe he just takes the $42 million, because I would also take that $42 million.
Same with Westbrook taking the $41 million.
Yeah, I think the market, once you get past Brunson, and I think Sexton, where he sees himself, is kind of guys that are going to be MLE or lower. Like Schroeder is not going to be a guy that I think commands lots of money. I don't think like Avery Bradley commanding lots of money. I don't think
Tyus Jones might command lots of money.
But I think even he's like, considering the teams that have cap space, it's like MLE money. It's like Delano is like MLE money.
Yeah,
and I think Sexton is aiming for a level above that. And I think that's where this is where like things could compress. This is where things get a little bit dicey if you're kind of practically kind of thinking through this a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And let's just break it down, like at some of the top guards, like just salary wise, like John Wall, $42.7 million player option. I think he's going to pick that up. James Harden has the same exact player option. It's interesting to see what him and Philly do there, but I think he'll probably sign an extension of the Sixers. Westbrook will probably pick his up. Brad Beal, by all accounts, is probably going to be in Washington. He has a $35 million player option. Kyrie Irving has a $34 million player option in Brooklyn. And after that, you have like Gary Harris. Handsomely by the Bulls, but I joke about the Kings just because they tried to lure Levine away a while back. And then it gets kind of tricky from there. And it's just going to be a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of posturing. But like Chris said, other than Jalen Brunson, who is really the best guard that could be like readily available? Because like I don't think James Harden is going to realistically sign to like any team in the league unless like some team offers him like more money and strip clubs than he could ever want. But it's interesting to see what happens. But again, at the same time, do you think the Cavs really will let it get to this point as well? Like, would they let him kind of explore a market with the team, let him sign an offer sheet somewhere else, and either match it or run the risk of losing him or trying to get something out of him in a sign and trade? Like it's all tricky stuff.
Well, this is where I get to with it just being, I think, he's the one guy that maybe commands money above the mid-level exception. I think that is kind of where this is headed.
Him and maybe like Pat Connaughton. Like Pat Connaughton is probably going to get paid pretty well if he doesn't stay with the Bucks.
Yeah, but just think about the teams that have flexibility and what Pat Connaughton might want it for his career at the same time. Like it depends on. It has to be a mix of this team needs player X, and this player needs and this team wants player X. Like it has to kind of be these two mismatch of what the player is kind of looking for at that stage in their career, and like. And the money, and maybe Pat Connaughton signs like a slight increase of an extension in Milwaukee to kind of stay there, but also get a little bit more money. Like that seems like a possibility. You could work something out there. There are different ways that this could play out with different guys where it can impact that. And if I'm Collins Camp, if like the MLE is like the best thing you could get out on the market, if that's what it came to for whatever reason, I would be seeing if you could just go sign whatever you do with the Cavs, but B, if like things break down in that way for whatever reason, what I would be asking for is like you would take the qualifying at that point. And that is like the least likely thing to happen. That just doesn't really happen historically. Like guys just play out the qualifying. Like it usually doesn't work out that way for guys at this level. It just historically hasn't. So I would guess that this heads to a point where he signs like a multi-year contract, maybe like very early in free agency, and it keeps him back. And maybe the Brunson thing is the thing, because if it happens before or after, I don't know. But if I'm the Cavs, I almost wonder if there's like if the leverage play from Sexton's camp is, hey, let's get this done now, and like the price is a little bit higher just because of the specter of what Jalen Brunson's going to do. And look, these teams and these agents know more about what the market's going to be than we do. Like there are tampering is not usually a real thing that gets enforced. There will be a gauge of like what that market is going to be. And if how that hangs over this is like the only thing that I find, we're speculating about that, but I find that to be just the reasonable path to that a little bit.
Well, I've asked around about this before, back when he first didn't sign or come to agreement with the Cavs, is the Cavs might feel the luxury of restricted free agency because of the teams you listed, and they might say like, okay, if you want to go ahead and test the market, who's going to sign you to the offer you're looking for? Then we're not going to be willing to match. So like the Cavs have the luxury of being able to match an offer sheet if it gets to that point. And just based on what's been said publicly, I don't like you said, I think maybe they wrap this up not the day of free agency, but like soon after free agency starts. I was saying that in jest about letting it go out in weeks.
Yeah. We also just, I think that we haven't seen what Kobe Altman in his era of Cavs general manager would do. Like Collin Sexton is his pick. This is the first time we've gotten to this point with a Kobe Altman draft pick and then seeing how they would explore this. This wasn't a guy that came into a situation that had tons of picks and process junk play that handled the fall of the LeBron era with lack of assets. And Sexton's like the one thing. And how they kind of approach that will maybe be a data point for us in understanding how Kobe works going forward. Evan, let's wrap up there though. Let's do one tankathon sim to last time before the lottery. I'm going to do mine first. You pull it up and I'll do mine first. Mine is the Cavs finished 14th. The top 5 is Portland at 1, OKC, the Pelicans at 3, the Rockets at 4, and the Orlando Magic at 5.
Mine is still spinning, and it is done. The Cavs stay at 14 for me, and the top 5 is the Orlando Magic at 1, the New Orleans Pelicans at 2, the Houston Rockets at 3, Sacramento Kings at 4, and the Detroit Pistons at 5, which, boy, oh boy, adding Zion Williamson and Jabari Smith to that already pretty fun Pelicans team seems a little unfair.
Could be fun. All right, that's going to be it, though. We'll be back after the lottery to break that all down, do a little double dip there to see where the Cavs will go from there, do some lottery stuff, talk about some names, talk about more about Collin Sexton. It's going to be a fun episode as we get closer and closer to the draft and really get an idea of where the Cavs are actually going to pick. Talk to you then. Check out Locked In NBA to check out the conference finals as those are coming up now. Celtics and the Heat and the Warriors and the Mavs. Evan, who are you picking? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I had the Suns as my pick to win the championship, and boy, howdy, was I fucking wrong.
I'm going Celtics Mavs in the finals, and I'm picking Boston to win it. That's where I'm at.
I'm going to go Heat Warriors, the Battle of West Goldberg, and I'm going to go with the Warriors winning a championship just because they have the most experience out of all those rosters, and I think them being there before really gives them quite an edge.
Boston's really good.
Boston's phenomenal. I think the Marcus Smart news really throws a damper on things, especially also, for a grind out team like the Heat.
Yeah,
might be tricky.
Also, I'm expecting if Cavs fans want something to invest in that kind of makes them feel petty, I suggest that I think Luka Doncic may do LeBron-y like things and hunting down Steph Curry on switches and trying to attack him one-on-one a lot in that series. That's going to be a ton of fun. Can't wait to listen to Locked In NBA breakdowns. Evan's driving to Chicago. He's going to cover that for us. Be safe. Behave yourself. Okay?
Yeah. I'm going straight to the hotel, taking a nap, and going to the draft lottery, then going home to said hotel, writing a story and recording with you.
That's what we like to hear. Safe, clean, fun. Everyone be well. Talk to you tomorrow.